and welcome to the Analyst dated 20th of March. Through this session, you will learn good details about 5 important current affair articles derived from the Hindu and Indian Express. So what are these topics? Let's have a look. Through the first article, we will analyze the evolution, role and challenges of civil society organizations in a functional democracy. In the second article, we will make an assessment of the corruption scenario in India. In the third article, we will analyze the India-Bhutan relations through an editorial analysis featured in The Hindu. Then, we will study what are infrastructure investment trusts, also known as InvITs, and how are they performing in India. And finally, we will wind up the discussion by reading highlights of World Air Quality Report, which has declared Delhi the most polluted capital of the world recently. So, let's get started. So, hello. Our first topic is about civil society organizations. And why are we reading about this? Because as the election season is taking its fervor, what has happened that recently a civil society organizations which was working for farmers, this is the Kisan Majdoor Commission, has recently said that we want to make farmers issue an electoral agenda. The context is not very important, but this topic is extremely important from UPSC point of view. It deals with this part of syllabus where it says we have to study about developmental processes, developmental industries, the role of NGO, SHGs, various groups and associations, donor, charity, institutionals and other stakeholders. And when you talk about civil society organizations, you talk about all of them collectively. So we will analyze and assess what is the role of civil society organization in the overall development of India as an economy, as a society and as a polity. But before that, naturally we will read and understand what is civil society organization. Is it a trade union? Is it a pressure group? Is it an NGO or is it a corporation? Well, it is all of them. It is all of these components which are basically outside. It's basically a very broad concept, a very broader concept which encompasses all the organizations working in a country which are non-state and non-market in nature. So if I were to depict it in a form of flowchart, so can we draw it like this, that let's say this is the entire society. And all the societies, all the organizations in the society can be broadly divided into state, market and the third sector, which is the civil society organization. Now within these civil society organization would come multiple components, for example some trusts, some NGOs, some pressure groups, anything that is driven by the civil society which ultimately makes your country a good society. So they have a very good role to play, and in fact they also influences both the other sectors, market and state, both positively and negatively. So therefore there is a growing importance of civil society organization in a functional democracy, especially like India. As you can see that we understand that there is great importance for it in the growth and the development of the country because it provides multiple opportunities for the country. For example, providing mobilization of resources, representation of the people, being voice of the voiceless, analyzing and keeping the policies accountable, and also making sure that certain skills like training, education, all of that is imparted even at the grassroots level. So the grassroots empowerment cannot be actualized without proper participation of civil society organization. They are not necessarily made by just citizens alone. They can be from non-citizens as well. They can be from foreigners as well. But the point is, the idea is that members of the civil society come together in order to pursue some developmental agenda. Let me give you some example of this. We have got Amnesty International, we have got Greenpeace, little infamous ones of late, and also we have got Kudumbashi, we have got Jivika of Bihar. So these are some of the good examples, and obviously they are driven by the citizens of India, whereas the previous two were driven by the foreigners. Now anyway, if you talk about the origin of this word civil society organization, where did it come from? It came from the first time from a German philosopher named Hegel. So Hegel said that a good society would only be actualized with the help of civil society organizations. Then what caused for evolution of civil society organizations globally? So the impetus to the growth of civil society organizations were made after and during the decades of 1980s. That is when the global scientists across the world felt a problem. The problem or the issue of representation in the policy making. They felt that people or citizens, because they don't have that much trust in the state nowadays, they are not participating adequately in policy making. So they called for a solution And the solution was that to create their own citizen society organizations or civil society organization. So it all started, the impetus of 1980s political reforms gave an impetus to the creation of civil society organization. And if you talk about Indian perspective, we've been having civil society organization ever since colonial times. In fact, if you look into the 18th century, the 19th century organizations, for example, Brahmo Samaj, for example, Arya Samaj, what are they? They are civil society organization. But were they rendered any legal status? Were they legalized at that time? Not at all. They were not legalized until the Societies Registration Act of 1860. And even after that, they were not getting the government support because government was not recognizing the importance of civil society organization. In fact, government was trying to stifle them. Only the independent India, when the independent India saw the growth of democracy, it understood the importance of civil society organization. And therefore, for the first time, government started promoting NGOs from its own end by providing financial support, by providing skill training, etc. And this was done via a trust. This trust was the Central Social Welfare Board, created in 1953. This was the first ever Indian governmental intervention in order to promote a civil society organization and specifically the NGOs. And then you will see decentralization happening through Panchayati Raj. So from 1958 onwards, you will see an uprising, a growth of a lot of cooperatives. For example, Amul grew, and there were many decentralized cooperatives, decentralized unions taking care of the agriculture crisis of the India and the food crisis going on, etc. So you will see enormous growth in cooperatives and in trade unions and the other unions after the decentralization happened in India. Then until here, we will not see any coming up of international NGOs or international CSOs in our country. Until what happened in 1965 to 67, famine happened in India, droughts happened in India, and in order to provide international aid to recover from this crisis, for the first time the international NGOs started coming to India, and for the first time India started getting foreign funds to support the social sector. So entering of international NGOs will also start happening from 1965 onward. Now, after post 70s, you will see a drastic increase in the importance of CSO in India. Why? Because there was an abuse of political state power that was seen via the imposition of emergency in 1975. Once the emergency happened, the citizens believed it actually eroded their trust on the state, and therefore they started creating their own organizations. So therefore you will see exponential increase after 1960s. And the citizen activism was further empowered and strengthened via some of the acts. For example, the Right to Information Act of 2015, for example, the Lokpal Act. So they also kind of strengthened what? The citizen activism. Now let us also analyze why are they so important for the economy, for the democracy, for the society? Because of the multiple roles played by it. It can be broadly categorized as, first of all, they are essential watchdog of both the two pillars of the economy, of the society, which is the state and the market. So have you heard about Lokniti? Have you heard about CDS? Have you heard about Greenpeace? Or have you heard about PRS? We often take our UPSC articles from PRS. All of these are nothing but the watchdogs which are keeping a check on the policies that are being formulated by the state and also by the market. So therefore, they are essential in order to maintain a direct accountability and transparency for the other two markets, for the other two sectors, which is market and state. Then they also have got good expertise because these have collaborated in order to bring a certain good change in the society. They often start pursuing research and developments. And because they are pursuing that, they are better qualified for identifying the problems, and then for providing innovative solutions for those problems. So you can see some of the examples like the Acer and the Pratham. They promote the educational status. They also give reports and indices for the same, and they also give innovative solution in order to promote education sector. Then they're also great capacity builders. So if you talk about capacity building in terms of providing finances, or let's say microfinances, or providing them skills or trainings or educations, etc., then in that case, they've been very active. And you know the example of Jivika of Bihar, Jivika Mission of Bihar, or Kudumbushi of Kerala have been pretty much a news of late. And they have been extreme capacity builders which caused for the empowerment of the most marginalized sections. In fact, Jivika and Kudumbashi were responsible for women empowerment in Kerala and Bihar respectively. And last but not the least, they form a very essential voice of the voiceless. They are representative of a representative democracy. They represent the tribal people, the vulnerable group, the marginalized group, and the underprivileged group. And therefore, they try to bring them or their concerns in par with the other challenges or the other concerns that are taking national policy leverage. Now, this was about the roles played by them. But then there are certain challenges also which goes on with the civil society organization, and we need to be mindful of the same. Civil society organization is comprised of whom? Of citizens. And citizens are driven by emotions. This is also being told by Hobbes. Citizens are most often driven by emotions and not by the rational all the times. So therefore, this particular sector is highly manipulative, or it can be very, very easily manipulated. So which means they can also, according to the National Security Advisor, they can also possess, or they can also become a new frontier of the war. In fact, Ajit Doval said that it has now become the fourth generation warfare, previous to the ones where we were using arms or we were using technology. Now people are using people are using civil society organizations by manipulating them, because they can be manipulated out of emotions. They can be driven for biases regarding their caste, their region, their creed, their religion, etc., their languages also, and therefore they can also be very easily manipulated against the interests of the nation. So they can also be a potential harm if they are not regulated properly for the national sovereignty. Now, they also sometimes halts the economic development. An IB report revealed that the ill effects or the disadvantages have been so much so that in the last 30 years it has been observed that some of the activities of civil society organization has taken a toll on about 2 to 3% of the overall GDP of the nation. Why? Because some of the infrastructural projects which would have contributed to these 2 to 3% have been halted due to the opposition that they attracted out of these organizations like Greenpeace and Amnesty International. They have been deregistered by the government very, very recently because of the activities that were considered anti-national and anti-development. So they also try to halt the economic development. For example, many power plants, the Kudankulam power plant, the thermal power plants, whenever the government tries to set them up, civil society organizations, specially funded by foreign institutions, they come into play and they try to stifle the development of that project in the name of environment conservation. This obviously takes a toll on the economy. Then it also brings a threat to the civil society only. A manipulated civil society organization is very influential in manipulating the other parts of the civil society with the help of word of mouth publicity, etc. So it has been seen that whenever these civil society organizations do not find adequate channels to communicate their grievances to the state, or if they feel that state is not hearing their grievances, they resort to another undemocratic processes. For example, creating groups which are trying to overthrow the government itself. It was seen in Brazil, it was seen in Uganda, where they were trying to overthrow the political parties itself and creating a new form of illiberal wing of the democracy. So they tried to usurp the powers of the government. They try to overthrow it. You see many civil society organizations in Manipur and Northeast, etc. What they are trying to do? They are trying to overthrow the government only. So basically, they challenge the core liberal democratic norms. They try to break the rule of law and also essentially threatening the very democracy, also threatening the civil society of the nation in large. And finally, there's an interface gap which happens between government and CSO. So many a times, civil society organization has recommended something, has brought in certain innovative reforms, but the government is deaf to it. Because of certain bureaucratic inertia, red tapeism, they do not feel much invited and much welcomed into policy making, which also makes them more regressive and against the government. Then, over-regulation by the government. These 2 points are actually challenges faced by the CSO. So, the over-regulation by the government in the form of, let's say, stifling the foreign funds that are coming. For example, the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act of 2010 imposed certain stringent guidelines which made the funding or acquirance of the fund very difficult for the civil society organization. If they are not getting the funds, how will they perform their activities effectively? So therefore, over regulation also try to stifle the promotion, the growth, and the development of civil society organization. So then what can we do about them? Because ultimately we realize they are very important for development. So what can we do? We can strengthen them by collaborating them with the state. And first effort was taken by the National Policy on Voluntary Sector 2007, where for the first time government realized that the innovative solutions coming from the civil society organization should be welcomed, should be empowered, and should be promoted. So government started funding them and aiding them in order to pursue research and development, and this actually led to growth of many organizations like Acer, Pratham, etc. And this is basically when your government recognizes the role of civil society organization, this also strengthens the trust of civil society organization on the government, essentially leading to creation of a social contract as told by Hobbes and Locke. So this is the first method which you can imply. Second, you have to seek the redressal against the fake claims by the government. You have to empower the CSO so much so that they are setting the government accountable, and they can also sue the government if they found them to be faking the claims. And this has already been done in USA with the help of False Claims Act, where CSOs are basically empowered to sue the government if they see any false claims coming. And then they need accreditation and certification. Why do we need this? In order to set certain standards which must be followed by the CSOs, because we also understand that they can be manipulated and we have to safeguard them from them. So obviously there needs to be accreditation and certification of the CSOs, especially those which are seeking funds, and this has been recommended by the 9th report of the 2nd ARC. Then we need certain regulations to control CSO and its activities itself, so that it doesn't get marginalized, it doesn't get polarized. For that, there have been certain regulations for NGO, Society Registration Act, the IT Act. For the trust regulation, there has been the Public Trust Act, and there has been some model regulations for regulating charities as well. We have been creating it, but there needs to be standardized regulations across all the CSOs with certain basic guidelines which should never be compromised by these. Then we need to encourage the credibility of the government so that it also enhances the trust of the citizens on the same. This will also help us demotivate the civil society organizations against organizing against the government. Then we also need to limit the CSO advocacy from using aggressive means, as that can be seen in the form of Naxalism or terrorism. Then also engaging in political parties. So this can be done by improving the accountability and transparency that the government is showing up. Of course, some of the infrastructural measures, like for example, setting up digital infrastructure, setting up educational infrastructure can help. Then using some of the technological measures with the help of which we are directly accountable about our policy making to the civil society organizations and welcoming their feedback as well. That should also be created. A portal of that sort should be created for government to citizen incentive and interaction. And then finally, explore its role in shaping the India's development, because they can do so much so for the society. They can help you mobilize the resources. They can help you provide development in the very last miles. They can help you bring a positive notion about the government across the society. They will help you eventually also provide the national security and preserve the territorial integrity. So many benefits are there. They will also provide you innovative solutions in education, in healthcare, etc. with their own expertise. So all of that needs to be leveraged, because end of the day we realize that CSO is very important. And as you know that there are three components of the society, which are basically Sarkar, Bazaar and Samaj. And an Atmanirbhar Bharat can only be realized after we strike a mutual cooperation between all these three components of society. So this was all about this discussion. Moving on to the next topic, where we'll read about the corruption in India as the election season is going on, and quite naturally, many political parties and the leaders would be claiming and would be making promises over strict actions against corruption in the upcoming years. This topic from UPSC point of view is more important than the others. Why? Because it has got coherence from two parts of the syllabus, GS2 and GS4, making it more important for assessment. So to begin with, What is corruption and how do we define corruption in the first place? In very simple words, in fact, taking from the definition of World Bank, corruption is the abuse of power. And where do you derive maximum power from, maximum authority from? You derive it from the public offices. So it is basically the abuse of public office for private gains. This definition is given by World Bank and a good definition to be incorporated in our introductions. But a more lucid and an innovative definition is given by the second ARC report of India, where it gave a formula for corruption. So if anybody, any authority or any organization has got monopoly, has got discretion to exercise, has got secrecy to maintain, and all of this is fine until the person doesn't have accountability to maintain with the people of India, or the people the person is subjected or accountable to. So this definition of monopoly plus discretion plus secrecy minus accountability amounts to ultimate corruption as defined by the second ARC report. Now, what is the scenario of corruption in India? We are performing pretty poorly, as you can see from the Corruption Perception Index published by the Transparency International. We stand at a very low rank of 85 out of 180 assessed countries. So then naturally makes us to analyze what are the causes of corruption in India. There is not one, two or three causes. There are multiple causes which can be clubbed again into the following causes. All of it starts from the legacy issues that we have been having. So India predominantly was ruled by colony, a British colony, which was actually ruled by the East India Company, which is practicing crony capitalism. And the intrinsic motivation for them was to enhance corruption in any whichever way in order to give them more profit as compared to others. Then this company rule was converted into crown rule, but the modes, means and agendas of administration remained the same. That is to have as maximizing private returns as compared to returns for the social development. So therefore, we had this intrinsic colonial tendencies, colonial legacy of corruption intrinsic in our political system. Second thing is, we have got poverty ever since the colonies ruled over us, ever since the British ruled over us. So rampant poverty, colonial practices, the pre-liberalization practices that was having the license raj, where you have to go to the government every time, making them a leverage, gaining them a leverage that they can ask for the money in return, eventually causing the corruption. All of these legacy issues entrenched the issue of corruption deeply into our democracy, deeply into our systems. Second thing is working of the political system of India right now. So there you can see that there is prevalent use of black money in the elections. In order to get the funds, they often take it from illegal sources, illegal channels, which amounts to black money collection. Then obviously there is lack of transparent election funding as well. We have got no forms. The electoral bonds have also been deemed unconstitutional now. So we have actually not got any proper mode of transparent election funding. So you never know where the money is coming from. This also promotes the feeling of supporting a party through black monies. And where do black money will come from? Obviously from the channels of corruption. So corruption breeds black money, which breeds Indian polity to a large extent. Then eventually it leads to criminalization of the politics. Indian polity is heavily ridden by the criminals who are actually your MPs, who are actually your MLAs, working at many political posts. And because criminals are working in the politics, you can also assume that when they will take up the post, when they'll try to give you the services, they'll actually be performing some illegal means, which is the corruption. And it comes quite natural because of the nature of polity we have. Then if you talk about the economic structure of India, that also makes it very easy for the corruption to penetrate in it. Indian economy is largely informal in nature. Informal sector, which means it is under-regulated, in fact unregulated most of the times. The incomes that they are making, revenues generating, all of that goes unregulated, unreported. Makes it very easy for them to perform corruption without any fear. Also, there is huge wealth inequality, which means, as you can see, that there is huge inequality according to the Lawrence curve. So as you must have already known that less than 1% of the Indian population has more than 50% of the total money or the total capital that is generated by India, which makes richer more rich and the poorer more poor. So why is this happening? because then it becomes in their very intrinsic nature to source the money by whichever means possible, be it through legal means or illegal means like corruption. So the economic structure is also very percolative or very penetrative to corruption. Next, if you talk about the law challenges, then we have got certain legal lacunas as well. The current laws are pretty much outdated. Corruption changes its ways and forms with each and every mode, with each and every change in generation. For example, base erosion, profit shifting is also a form of corruption. The other forms of corruption are embezzlement, nepotism could be a form of corruption, cronyism could be a form of corruption. So basically, the outdated laws are such that they are not able to deal with the contemporary forms of corruption. So essentially leaving a big loophole in regulating the different forms of corruption. Then loopholes in the autonomy, the authorities or the bodies which are responsible for doing this, for example, CVC, for example, CBI, for example, Lokpal, are they ultimately independent? No, there are certain questions on their independence as well. So obviously, loopholes in the autonomy of the bodies which are taking care of the corruption scenario in India. Then dilution of certain legal provisions which were essentially formulated to disempower the corruption. For example, the Lokpal Act, for example, the Whistleblower Protection Act, they have also got certain dilution in their provisions. Then judicial delays, if you are not getting the justice on time, then it is almost equal to justice being delayed. So when it comes to corruption, there is lack of protection of the whistleblowers. There is targeting of the upright officers. You must have heard about the name of Ashok Khemka many a times, because the person is challenging or coming out in front, revealing the corruption cases. So the person is getting targeted. Many a times they get death threats as well. And there is also delay in the prosecution of the criminals who were performing corruption. So these judicial lacunas are also increasing the corruption more so. Then there are social problems. First of all, a social mindset that we should be able to take up the money in any whichever way, because now we are going to a more sort of consumerism culture as compared to socialist culture. And also there are failures in moral education these days. People are not taught about the basic ethics of upholding the right values, of not forming the attitude of consumerism, so much so that it can create corruption or it can make corruption as a second nature. So anyway, these were the causes. Now, what are the impacts of corruption? Why do we need to deal with corruption, and why is it such a big menace? Because it deals with not just one front of the society, but all the fronts. It impedes your development, it impedes the economy, it impedes the society as well. It degrades all these factors. So how will you be able to make India, which is a developing nation, aspiring to be a developed nation, how will you be able to actualize that dream? Now, what are the legal frameworks for fighting corruption? Again, very important points to be known. There are certain laws and certain regulations. So, government has criminalized corruption for the first time with the Prevention of Corruption Act of 1988. Provisions of the same were asked in UPSC prelims examination. Then the Companies Act, in order to curb the corruption from the corporate governance, strengthen the corporate governance. This came in the year 2013. Then the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act also came in order to regulate the fundings that are coming from foreign channels, foreign sources, so that they do not become a source of corruption. Now, talking about certain regulatory body, we have set up Lokpal, we have set up Lok Ayukt, we have set up Central Vigilance Commission, we have got CBI, etc. And they are responsible for taking care or analyzing, evaluating the performance of especially the public officials in the public domain, whether they are performing or whether they are doing corruption or not. So we have got certain legal frameworks, but they needs to be bolstered, they needs to be strengthened. And how can we do that? This is the following way forward. First of all, the need is to have intrinsic education imparted at not only the civil administration level, not only at the institute level, but also at the school level. So Nolan Committee gave the following recommendations in 1995. It enlisted 7 ethical and moral values which should be complied by the people who are holding the public offices. Here are the following 7 recommendations that you can have a read of. Then we also need to perform certain electoral reforms. Most of the money is coming from unchanneled, unreported sources. So there is also now a need to convert or to basically utilize the state funding for funding the election so that it doesn't goes unreported. There should be certain expenditure limits as well. within which a party should be able to operate all of its political expenses. And you need to empower the election commission by giving them rights to sue the people who are not following the model code of conduct. Because right now, though it has the power to impose the same, not has the power to sue for the same. Next, strengthening the institutions which were taking care of anti-corruption in your country, which means the Whistleblower Protection Act, which means the CVC, which means CBI, they need to be strengthened. Then at the administrative levels, there should be certain reforms as well. We need to set up a civil services board and we need to provide them regular and optimized training. We need to provide a preventive vigilance and code of ethics. All of these measures will make sure that the current running and working civil servants do not apt for corruption, because they are being regulated at the administrative level. Next, you have to reduce the human discretion in decision making. How will you be able to do that? By incorporating technology which is more transparent. For example, the MyGov portal, the CP grams, all of this is important. You can also set clear standard operating procedures to formulate any decision or to take up any decision. This will avoid, or this will at least lessen up the amount of human discretion. And human discretion without accountability gives lead to what? Gives lead to corruption. Now, we will talk about the role of social sector and how can we improve them. We also need to bolster up, strengthen the ethics that are imparted to the citizens. So we need to provide citizen awareness. We need to provide them reformed curriculums. We also need to empower the citizen so that they are able to perform social audits, which means analyzing and setting accountability for all the policies that are being implemented and all the executive decisions. Then we should also formulate a Rights to Services Act similar to that of the Rajasthan Social Accountability Bill, where it empowers social audits. It legalizes the social audits for all the executive decisions, all the plannings. So by doing all of these measures, by actually taking this multi-dimensional approach, you will finally be able to make India zero tolerant towards corruption. Now moving on to international relations, we'll be assessing India-Bhutan relations over here. And a very beautiful assessment has been made by the former Indian ambassador to Bhutan, Mr. Gautam Bambawale, and we will be analyzing it more thoroughly, more deeply. First of all, to begin with, Bhutan, which is one among the direct neighborhood. It's a landlocked country and it's a direct neighborhood of the India. Surprisingly, it only shares 800 kilometers border with India, but has got huge ties with India and a very one of the strongest ties with India, one of the strongest model of regional partnership that can seen across the globe. This is between India and Bhutan. And why is this happening? Because of the mutual trust and respect that we have for each other. So known for brotherhood since the ancient times, because of the ancient ties, because both of them have been Buddhist lands, the diplomatic relations started for the first time with the Treaty of Friendship signed in 1949, which accorded three things. First of all, both of the countries said that we will be taking up the responsibilities of non-interference in each other's internal matter. Second, it facilitated and it provided for free trades between both the countries, and due to which India and Bhutan are now one of the largest trading partners. Next, it also said that India, or basically Bhutan, would be a protected state for India, not a protectorate, which means it is having its own autonomy over its internal affairs and diplomacy. But yes, it will be protected. The responsibility is on the India to protect it. So this particular Treaty of Friendship laid the foundation of India-Bhutan relationship for the first time, and ever since then we have been seeing that this relationship is growing multifolds across multiple domains. These domains, first of all, is the strategic domain. We have got very strong strategic ties. Then we have got very strong economic ties. Then we also have got certain cultural links. Then we also collaborate in the domain of environment. So across at least these four domains, we have been performing brilliantly. When you talk about the strategic thing, you must know that Bhutan is a landlocked country, but it's a very critical state for India because it acts as a buffer state between India and China, which are basically rivals. So it acts as a buffer state between India and China, which essentially means that maintaining the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Bhutan directly corresponds to maintaining the same for India. So therefore, Bhutan is of strategic importance to India. For the same, India provides assistance in the terms of defense, in the terms of development of transport, in the terms of development of other infrastructure like roads, etc. India pursues that. India also provides training to the military personnel over there in order to ensure territorial integrity of Bhutan. Then, Bhutan also provides us the strategic access of some of the areas. You must have heard about the Doklam standoff that happened between India and China in the year 2017. So, what happened at that time? The disputed territorial area between Bhutan and China. This is where the Chinese came, and this was basically a tri-junction. The Doklam was a tri-junction between China, Bhutan, and India. And as a result of this, because of the Chinese incursion in this region, it saw a standoff between the Indian military and the Chinese military. Fortunately, we were given the access to deploy our troops in the region of Doklam, which basically lies in Bhutan, in order to resist the Chinese oppressions. So therefore, or the Chinese incursion. So therefore, we were also allowed access of their territories many a times, not only for the developmental projects but also for the strategic projects. Now, talking about the economic partnership, India is the largest developmental partner of Bhutan. In fact, most of their GDP is directly driven by India. Bhutan is the largest trading partner. India is the largest trading partner of Bhutan, and second, it is also the largest export destination of Bhutan. So most of the products that Bhutan exports, it exports where? It exports to India. Then India also helps Bhutan to develop and harness its hydropower potential, because see, Bhutan economy is very, very fragile. Its ecology is very, very fragile. And as you can see that it is run by many rivers, the Manas River being the largest river of Bhutan. And it is where most of in many of its tributaries, the hydroelectric projects needs to be developed. And this effort was taken up by the Indian government. So it helps and encourages Bhutan to build up a lot of hydropower projects. How does it benefit India? So India doesn't have a lot of renewable energy potential as compared to Bhutan. So obviously, when we are investing in the projects of Bhutan, then it is giving them energy, it is giving them electricity, and at the same time it is giving them revenue. Because why revenue? Because the surplus electricity we import for India, we import back to our country. So it is actually a win-win situation for both of them. One of the oldest and the largest hydroelectric power plant, that is the Chuka hydropower plant, which was set up in the Wangchu river in Bhutan, was actually set up by Indian assistance. And also now in 2024, another project is about to reach completion. This is the Punat Sangchu project, and this is also going to be a breakthrough project for the energy security of both the nations. Next, we also provide them financial aid for multiple development projects. In this editorial only, it has been featured that a special economic zone is going to be created in Bhutan. And whom are they taking financial aid from? It's India. We are going to provide them the capital investment, the technology transfer, financial assistance. So this is the Gelepu Mindfulness City, which is a special economic zone. It can be asked, and this is going to be created with the help of Indian assistance. Talking about the cultural ties, we have got cultural ties in the forms of Buddhist links. India also assists Bhutan in the cultural preservation by organizing multiple functions and festivals and also workshops in order to promote the Bhutan culture in India. And then we also provide education to many of the Bhutan students by giving them due reservation in multiple central institutions. Talking about the environmental collaboration, Bhutan is one among the very rare countries in the world who have kept up their carbon neutrality, which means consumption is equal to the restoration of carbon. And India actually plays very important role in supporting its green initiative, ensuring that it remains carbon neutral by providing development of renewable energy infrastructure projects, like example solar power plants, for example providing sustainable tourism, which is again beneficial for both the economies, India and of course Bhutan, and also ensuring forest conservation. Do you know one forest one protected area which shares common links or common territorial area between Bhutan and India? This is the Manas National Park. And this is also the same region where we have got another common ecology. This is the Himalayan belt. So if you collaborate, you will be able to safeguard the Himalayan ecosystem as well. So the collaboration on environmental front is also very important, and it has been running effectively with India and Bhutan. But of course, like every other country, we have got certain challenges, certain concerns as well. So first of all, the first challenge is about China's growing influence in the Bhutan. China is rampantly trying to pursue infrastructure development in Bhutan, eventually trying to make it come under the Belt and Road Initiative. You must also know it for a fact that Bhutan is the only direct neighborhood of India which is not a party to Belt and Road Initiative. But now, as China is trying to provide it more incentives in terms of infrastructure development, therefore, it might be seen that Bhutan might get deviated from the Indian partnership and might move towards the Chinese projects. So, that is one challenge India faces. Second is occasional border incursions by China. If you analyze the borders of India and the India, China, and Bhutan, you will be able to observe there are multiple disputed areas, the red line areas. And these are also very strategic points for India, especially the region of Doklam. This is a tri-junction, as you can see, between India, Sikkim, and between your Bhutan, and obviously between China. So Chinese often try to put incursions into these disputed islands, into these disputed, not islands, these disputed regions. And this also poses issue or threat to our territorial integrity. So that also needs to be taken care of. Next is the public opposition in Bhutan. So many times what happens when you try to impose a lot of development in any other country, in a foreign country, you attract a lot of criticism from activism and citizens. Why? Because they say that you are putting up such a giant projects, but the employment is coming from Indians, and you are also degrading our ecology for the benefit of your own economy. So these speculations run around in even in the terms of Bhutan citizens. So therefore, some hydropower projects, Bhutan citizens say that they favor India only. They provide Indians the revenues, most parts of the tariff. They provide them, easy access to the employment opportunity. So all of this needs to be catered in order to build the trust of the Bhutanese people for India. Then trade imbalance also runs. So what happens, as you know, that we are their largest exporting partner, but still there is huge amount of trade deficit. It was observed in 2022 that, do you know how much Bhutan imports to us? About $49 billion worth transactions. And how much India imports, how much India exports to Bhutan? Almost double of this, 80 to like $90 billion. It's almost half. It's almost half of what they are exporting to India. So obviously there is huge trade imbalance. Whenever there is trade imbalance, this also again causes trust deficit among the countries. So all of these challenges needs to be taken care of by India. And how can we do that? First of all, we need to enhance, strengthen our economic integration, economic cooperation by facilitating trade, by facilitating more amount of their essential goods into our country. And then second, by providing them certain infrastructure, certain technology transfer so that they can bolster their own production of resources. Next, investment promotion needs to be done, again in order to strengthen their economy. And then joint venture should be there so that they do not feel that India alone is giving us financial incentive and there is no joint venture, there is no joint revenue sharing. Then for security cooperation, we need to strengthen it. So through joint exercises, joint military exercises, an exercise known as IMRAT is already being conducted. Then intelligence sharing needs to be done, capacity building needs to be done, and we can also collaborate heavily on environmental fronts. We can promote sustainable tourism, and we also need to perform high level meetings in order to deal and talk about all these challenges and understand each other's sentiments and issues. This is how we will take care that Bhutan becomes one of the most influential and strategic partner and becomes a model across the world for the kind of relationship regional partners should have with each other. Now we will talk about a very important concept of economy. This is the Infrastructure Investment Funds, also known as InvITs. Why is this in news? Because the National Highway Authority of India has raised money for road projects via InvIT. So what is InvIT and how does it work? And by the way, to which part of syllabus does it correspond to? Here, NHAI is important from prelims point of view. From mains point of view, you will be reading about infrastructure. You also read about some of the mutual funds, and it corresponds to almost all of them. So again, it corresponds to a good part of syllabus. Now, if you talk about infrastructure investment trusts, as you can see that they are collaborators, they are trusts, and they are very similar to mutual funds and they operate very similar to that of mutual fund. So what happens in mutual fund? You basically put in your money into a basket of into a basket of companies or into a basket of projects, and eventually you get the dividend out of it, or you gain the equity out of it. A very similar thing happens with InvIT as well, where these are the financial instruments similar to mutual fund, but they are having those sectors which are working in the field of infrastructure. So this pool of fund could be having certain renewable energy projects, solar power projects, could be regarding roads, creation of roads, or creating of other infrastructure, for example, buildings, etc. So all of these infrastructure companies will come together, pool together, and now you will be putting your money into them. So that is done through formation of a trust, and this trust is known as infrastructure investment fund. How does it work? It basically works by raising the money from the investors and investing it directly into the infrastructural projects. Now, these infrastructural projects can be of two types. First of all, projects which are completed, projects which are already completed, projects which are under construction or are not completed yet. So for the ones which are completed, the companies or these trust issues IPOs, initial public offerings, kind of putting it in the primary market, and everybody who is qualified investor would be able to invest in the same. The second kind is when there is a greenfield project which is under construction. So for them, IPOs are not issued, rather there is private placement, which means the trust managers, they allocate these funds or some of the equities to the people on the basis of their qualification, whether they are qualified, whether they are having that much net worth or not. On the basis of that, some of the placement is done. So this one, under construction work, is not open for everyone, but the completed works are open for everyone. Now, talking about the structure, so it essentially comprises of, it is first of all regulated by SEBI, and it was formed in the year 2014, and it is basically regulated by four key components. First of all, the trustee. So trustee is somebody who is responsible for the operation and compliance. So basically what happens is, see, many of the companies are coming. Let's say Adani is coming, let's say Reliance is coming, let's say Ambuja Cement is coming. All of them are coming in this infrastructural domain, and they are pooling their projects, fine, and they want to generate revenue, they want to generate capital. Now what will happen? A trustee would come, a trustee in the sense of a company, an asset management company, that would come, or basically it's a financial institution, it's like a bank, which will come and take care of all the operations of this fund, of this trust which has been created. And it also ensures that all of them, all the stakeholders are compliant to the norms of, let's say, SEBI, or to the norms of RBI. Next is the sponsor. So sponsors are the firms that set up the InvIT. It's not just one firm. Multiple firms are coming together to set this trust. So all of these are the trustees. Okay, they will be benefited, and in return, they will be giving some dividend to the investor. Now, talking about the investment manager who will manage all the assets and investment and ensure its profitability and optimization, it would be an investment management company, for example, Edelweiss. Then there will be a project manager which will oversee the execution of the infrastructure, whether infrastructure is getting completed on due time or not, whether it is profitable or not, or how is it running. Operations will be taken care of by project manager. Now, talking about the benefits InvIT has for investors and for developers. First of all, talking about why should you invest in InvIT and are you qualified for the same? First of all, there is a ceiling. There is a ceiling of 10 lakh rupees. And people who can invest up to this limit can only be able to invest in InvITs. Second thing is, they are mandated by SBI, which says that if you are an investor, then you will owe 90%, at least 90% of the net income generated by the trustees in every 6 months in the form of dividend, which means you will be ultimately credited in your account in 6 months. So you don't have to wait for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year maturity. Next thing, these dividends are exempted from any tax. They are exempted from long-term capital tax gain as well. And if you're trying to sell these InvITs unit, then they are also tax exempted. So basically, a lot of tax benefits is what you can get by investing in InvITs. Now, why is this important? Because government wants to boost infrastructure. Infrastructure will boost once it has got enough revenue, or it is able to generate enough capital. And it will be able to generate capital only if it is coming from lot of resources, lot of investors, that is from public. So in order to incentivize public, in order to boost the infrastructure which will boost the Indian economy, government has provided tax benefits. Now, what is the benefit for the developer? Developer needs money, and developer needs money from multiple sources. So it gets it in the best form with the help of monetizing its existing assets by pooling it in the form of trust and then collecting money and dividing it accordingly. Now, what is the difference between InvITs and REITs? So if you are trying to pool in all the capital and laying infrastructure out of it, let's say a power project, then this is InvIT. If a trust is being created in order to create houses or real estate, then this is known as REITs. A very basic common definition. Now, the type of asset is real estate property and infrastructural asset respectively. The type of funds, the type of investments that are coming. So funds in REITs, in the real investment, are pooled from investors for investing in income generating real estate asset. Whereas the InvITs are for those who are investing in operational infrastructure asset. Income generation for the investor happens through this means. In InvITs, we have already read that it is through dividends from the operational infrastructure asset, and in the REITs, they generate income through rental income of the real estate property, through the rent that is it is generating. They are not giving you dividend. Now, you can obviously see the examples over here. Who has got more risk? Of course, REITs have got more risk because these projects have been completed and they are about the buildings, and someone or the other would be coming in the building and would be giving you rent eventually. But when you talk about infrastructure, it gives you return in longer run. So it has got more risk as compared to REITs. Then regulations, both of them are being regulated by SEBI and both of them were founded in the same year, that is 2014. So I hope this concept is clear to you. Then in the last article, we will read about World Air Quality Report 2023, which has been making global highlights, and we will find out its key highlights, its key findings. One of them has also said that Delhi is the most polluted capital city in the world. So this one is very important, not just for prelims point of view, but also immensely important from mains point of view. This will give you adequate data for air pollution topic. Now, for World Air Quality Report, you must understand that this is not by UNESCO, by WHO, by or any other organization. This is by an NGO, which is IQ Air. So be mindful of this fact. Now, if you talk about the report findings, it has been very astonishing. India is the third most polluted country in the world, only after Bangladesh and Pakistan. So if we are talking about the metric, we are taking into account the WHO metric that it has presented for the standards of PM 2.5 pollution. It has been revealed that Bangladesh has exceeded to up to 15 times. Pakistan has exceeded to up to 14 times, and India has exceeded to up to 10 times this permitted level of PM 2.5 published by WHO. Then 42 of the 50 most polluted cities in the world is where? It's in India, and mostly localized in the Delhi NCR region. The most polluted metropolitan area, if you ask, it is Begusarai, followed by Guwahati, followed by Delhi. So Delhi is not the most polluted metropolitan area. Delhi in fact is the most polluted capital city. So as you can see from this, it's Delhi, then it's Dhaka, capital of Bangladesh, then it's the capital of Burkina Faso, then it's the capital Dushanbe of Tajikistan. Then it uses average concentration of PM 2.5. Please remember one more thing. If you talk about the National Air Quality Index, we take into account multiple factors. We take into account about 8 pollutants, another for the Sulfur Index. But when it comes to the Air Quality Index measured by or taken up by WHO, then it has been found that they take care of only PM 2.5 concentration. So only these have been assessed as primary indicator of the quality. Now, the key findings have also revealed another thing, that only 7 countries in the world have been able to comply with this WHO permissible limit of PM 2.5, and these countries are Australia, Estonia, Finland, Greenland, Iceland, Mauritius and New Zealand. Basically, most of the island nations. Then, if you talk about India How does India calculate its pollution level? It is done via a national and the nationwide metric, which is National Air Quality Index, published in the year 2014, which basically provides a color coding for each kind of pollution level. And this is basically to make the people aware and to also ensure that the government puts up the right measures very, very quickly. So this is also under one number, one color, one description scheme. NAQI has been published. It takes into account how many pollutants. The name of pollutants are very important. These are 8 in numbers, categorized under 6 category. These are PM10, PM2.5, similar to that of WHO. WHO takes into account only 6 under the revised guidelines of 2021. And PM10, PM2.5, then there is nitrogen dioxide, there is sulfur dioxide, there is carbon monoxide, there is ammonia, there is lead, there is ozone. Ozone is also one among the pollutant taken into account for NAQI. And then obviously in the previous session also, in the previous discussion of Delhi air pollution, I have already taught you how do you finally calculate the AQI. If the AQI is saying that it is 97, what does it mean? What are we taking into account? So what happens? We take into account multiple pollutants. Multiple pollutants, among them whichever are the highest ones, both of them are taken and then they are multiplied by the individual weightage. It has been seen that since PM2.5 is more minute, it becomes more easy for it to enter inside the body. It has got more respiratory effects as compared to other pollutants. Therefore, then you give higher weightage to PM2.5 as compared to PM10. Then you multiply it by respective weightage and finally you can see that after multiplying it with that integer, you will get the highest pollutant in the form of PM2.5. So whichever among these 8 pollutants scores the highest will ultimately reflect the NAQI index or the NAQI score. And similarly, government starts taking certain measures in order to deal in a stepwise manner against the air pollution in Delhi NCR region. So this was all about today's discussion and hope to see you again. Thank you so much and have a nice day.